Guy here with a quick message before we get on with the pod. As a thank you to our most dedicated and loyal viewers and listeners to Blood Red, we're inviting you to join our Blood Red Club. By joining, you'll get access to insider transfer content, as well as interviews with former favourites and those connected at Anfield. All you need to do is head to bloodredpodcast.co.uk, enter your email address, and our exclusive content will head to your inbox. That's bloodredpodcast.co.uk. Thanks. Now on with the show. It's a Blood Red podcast courtesy of the Liverpool Echo. I'm Guy Clark. Great to have you with us. With the weather warming up, so too is Liverpool's search for a forward, but who is on the Reds' radar? Plus, there's plenty from Austria to touch on as well. Friendly reviews, preview to come as well. Is it sink or swim time for Naby Keita? And a year on from being crowned Campiones on the Cop, we'll be taking in the summer sunshine full of nostalgia and thinking back to those heady days. Of course, they weren't that far ago anyway. But here to get into it all, we have our Liverpool correspondent Paul Gorst and Dan Kay as well along for the ride. Gents, how are we both keeping?
Very warm.
Yeah, I'm at threat of melting at the moment, Dan. Don't know about you.
When I had hair, I was ginger, so the sun doesn't always necessarily agree with me. I like it warm, but this is too warm for me. But I think today's the last day of crazy heat, isn't it? It's supposed to get a bit more normal tomorrow, so survive till then, we'll be all right.
Yeah, hopefully, just sun creamed up to the top of the head, including the patches here and there as well. But anyway, let's get into the important stuff. Gorsty, a year ago today, you were at Anfield to watch Liverpool lift the Premier League title high for the very first time and be crowned champions of England for the first time in 30 years. Mad to think that was a year ago now. So much sort of seems to have gone on since.
Yeah, it does, but in a way, it doesn't feel like a year ago in the slightest. It feels like 3 months at most. It's I couldn't believe it yesterday. I'd actually clicked on my Facebook memories and a picture of me and Jordan Henderson from last year when I was interviewing him at Anfield, and I remember that was the day before the Chelsea game, and Kai Delaney texted me because he did that interview with me, and he said, "Was that really a year ago?" And I said, "Yeah, it's crazy how fast that's gone." It's flown, but it was such a special night, and it was a nice touch from the Ground Safety Advisory Commission and the council at the time to allow the family and friends of the players into the ground. So what was normally can't remember the exact amount, but basically they boosted the numbers to 500. So
yeah, it was 250, wasn't it, at the time? I think it was allowed. So I think yeah.
So they doubled that. Obviously, the family and friends got to see them lifting the trophy, which was a nice touch, and they were all kind of on the pitch at full time celebrating and just soaking it all in. I remember on the night, I remember thinking this might be a little bit of a damp squib, and it'd be such a shame if it was, because this is what Liverpool have worked towards for 3 decades, and this is what so many fans have been waiting to see, and the cruelty that they're not allowed in there, and they're only going to be able to watch it on the telly for obvious reasons, for good, legitimate reasons that go way beyond football. But I did remember thinking that this might not be what we've all been waiting for as such. And then, to be fair to the club, they absolutely pulled it off in the best way that they could, with the soundtrack and the squad on the Cop and the firework display and just the general party atmosphere of it. I thought they did it really well, and I was privileged to be there. As I say, it was only one of 500 people to be in the ground that night, and I did remember thinking as they were lifting the trophy, how on earth have I managed to sneak my way into this one? But yeah, it was a special night, and mad to think that it was a year ago now.
Yeah, blagged your way in there, Gorsty. Yeah. But no, you were there obviously every step of the way at Anfield, watching the Reds on the march. And Dan, I suppose that is sort of the real difficult thing, even now, to kind of swallow, is especially given that Manchester United game and Salah's goal right at the end and the Cop bursting into "we're going to win the league," but then the fans not being able to kind of be there when all was said and done.
Yeah, I mean, there was a certain bittersweet element to it, particularly for, the likes of many long-standing supporters like myself who've had a season ticket for years and years and years, have dreamt and yearned for this moment for, well, the vast majority of my adult life. I was nearly 13 when Liverpool last won the league in 1990, and I was into my early 40s by the time it next happened. So it wasn't the way anyone imagined it, anyone envisaged it, anyone wanted it. but it still happened. And the thing that gave me a great deal of comfort is the way that we won that league. It was kind of, we couldn't count our chickens. And obviously some people were a bit more cautious than others, but it was clear really from beyond the halfway point that it was going to happen. And, I remember someone making the point that, Liverpool, we were winning the league almost every weekend, sometimes twice a weekend, if City were dropping points. So, not to be there for the moments of glory, will always be a certain sense of regret to that. Although, of course, obviously, it was events obviously beyond our control, nothing that we could do to change that. From my own point of view, I was relieved that the night that the league was actually clinched when Chelsea beat Man City, I was actually working the late shift, so I wasn't really able to celebrate properly that night. Although from a professional sense, I quite enjoyed being able to help report on that historic moment. But I wasn't working the night of the Chelsea game, so I was able to get together with some friends. Some of the pubs were open. So me and some of my pals actually watched it in the Dovedale Towers, which is actually where Jurgen Klopp filmed that beer advert that many of us will have seen on the telly for the last year or so. So there was a slight little Liverpool link. And we did have a great night. And, as I think a few of us have said at various points over the last year, fantastic that it happened. Fantastic that it came as well on the back of, what happened the year before with Madrid, and we all got to celebrate that fully. But the fact that we didn't really get our full value for money from winning the title the way we did in 2020, hopefully maybe just leaves that little bit of a spark, that little bit of unfinished business for Klopp and his players to, obviously we all hope and pray that this season we are going to be back in the grounds in significant numbers, and hopefully they'll want to do it again in front of a full Anfield to just have that little taste of what they missed out on 12 months ago.
Yeah, that psychological impact is huge, isn't it, Gorst? Because I remember speaking to Sander Westerveld in the autumn time, and he kind of said the not being able to have the bus parade will have a big impact that maybe has not been seen just yet on Liverpool. Obviously, at that time, they were still top of the Premier League and riding that crest of a wave. But I do feel that maybe it kind of is underplayed at times, not being able to kind of celebrate that title with a bus parade. Obviously, after the title was confirmed, Jurgen Klopp said there would be one. Quite clear now, there isn't gonna sort of be one, but now heading into the next season, giving all of last season was COVID affected as well, there will be that motivation to say, well, actually last time the fans were here, we won the title that season, let's do it again, and this time let's celebrate it properly. I think so, and I think that's part of the point of it being almost a bit of a perfect storm for Liverpool this summer. The first day one of pre-season, they've got so many of their key players involved, something that Jurgen Klopp hasn't really been able to do across the time at Liverpool. The likes of Salah and Trent, Van Dijk, Gomez, Matip, Mane, Oxlade-Chamberlain and Keita. These are real first team stars who are there on day one of pre-season, and normally, it's reserved for the likes of players who've retired from international football and some of the younger lads. So I think generally that giving them a full summer to get a good pre-season under the belt, and then returning to games with crowds. First game at Anfield since the Atletico Madrid game, that Burnley one, isn't it? The first competitive one anyway, and they'll be ready to go. They'll be absolutely flying out the traps, and I think that on top of it, the fact that they haven't been able to celebrate with their fans, they haven't been able to hear themselves being called champions of England or anything like that. Might just give them extra bit of wind in their sails. So I think all of those things combined, plus the likes of Jota and Thiago as well, who haven't played in front of an Anfield crowd as Liverpool players, I just think it's all kind of snowballing into something that could really see Liverpool fly out the traps next season. Yeah, most definitely. What lessons, Dan, do you think will be learnt from last season in terms of now heading into this next one? Gorst, you were saying there in terms of preparation can't really have been given a better chance, can it, with the players who have been part of this pre-season camp right from the off?
Yeah, that's advantageous to Liverpool, particularly as with it being a tournament summer. That's obviously not always the case, and obviously there will be a couple of players that have yet to return, but obviously not too many, because I suppose Thiago, we saw pictures of him a couple of days ago. He's still on holiday, but most of the Liverpool players that were involved in the tournament were obviously the captain Jordan Henderson, but most of the Liverpool players involved were knocked out quite quickly. So, as Gorsey says, great to have, more of them back earlier rather than later, because pre-season, as we know, is always a key time in terms of laying down what the manager wants, getting everyone fit, building that kind of morale and team spirit and so on. In terms of overall lessons that have been learned from last season, I mean, I don't know if you can read an awful lot into it, because it was just the weirdest season we hope and pray that there ever will be. Certainly that there ever was. God forbid we should ever have to go through anything like that again. Not obviously, not just in terms of the injuries Liverpool suffered, but obviously, you know, the compressed nature of the campaign because of COVID, and obviously no supporters, which affected every team. Of course it did. But I think it's fair. Obviously, we're a bit biased there. It's very, Klopp's whole thing from day one has been built on this symbiosis between the players and the crowd, and obviously that's fueled them for so much of it. So I don't think it's exaggerating to say that Liverpool suffered from the lack of crowd more than most. But hopefully that's something that's gone to bed. In terms of an actual lesson that could be learned, I think Liverpool took a gamble this time last year, didn't they, in terms of defensive recruits, by not replacing Dejan Lovren and taking a chance on the fitness of certainly two of the three central defenders, Matip and Gomez, who did have checkered injury track record. And obviously, as we all know, it came back to bite Liverpool in the backside massively. Obviously, they've already taken steps to remedy that by bringing in the likes of Konate. I suppose maybe the equivalent you could draw would be in midfield. Gini Wijnaldum, who obviously has been such a fundamental part of Klopp's whole era at Liverpool, is left. One of the key aspects of Wijnaldum I always thought was his versatility. He was able to perform in so many different roles across the midfield. So the suggestions are Liverpool are looking to bring in another midfield player. It may well not be until obviously it's important to get the right player as well. But you would hope lessons have been learned from that, because after 3, 4, 5 years of outstanding recruitment, which has been held up almost as a model for the rest of the game to take notice of, you would say last year was probably Liverpool's least effective season in terms of recruitment. So I'm sure that they'll be looking to improve on that this time around.
Yeah, we'll get on to the pre-season stuff in a bit as well, but let's dive into kind of the recruitment and transfer window. And of course, it is this time of year where you get absolutely peppered, whether it be across the website on Q&As, whether it be on podcasts with myself or wherever it be, all about transfers and where Liverpool are. But very clear, obviously, that a midfielder, and even more so maybe in the last couple of days with the links with Jarrod Bowen, that are forward, those kind of two positions very much right at the forefront of what Liverpool want to do.
It is, yeah. It's nothing we haven't said for a while now, is it? Liverpool obviously looking to keeping an eye on whatever midfielders are around, obviously to fill in for that Wijnaldum void that Dan mentions. And then, of course, looking to kind of bolster the attacking ranks. I mean, in terms of numbers, Liverpool have got more than enough, haven't they? They've got the front three, which has been the traditional forward line for 3 years now, and then Diogo Jota, and then Minamino, Origi, and Shaqiri. So there's 7 there going into 3 places. But the problem is who has had the desired quality there for Liverpool. I'd probably argue only 4 of them. I'm not sure Minamino, whether he's going to cut it at Liverpool long term. I think Divock Origi's time has passed now, and I think Shaqiri, while he does have certain aspects to his game that are good, for lack of a better term, I think he's probably in the same boat now with Origi, where maybe it's time for him to move on as well. So I think a lot depends on the futures of those 2 in particular. I don't think Minamino, as things stand, is going to be moving on. Southampton's interest has died down after that loan spell. So I think a lot depends on these 2, if 1 or 2 can move on, and whether or not suitors are coming forward. We know that Shaqiri was subject of interest last year from Lazio. In the January before that was Sevilla and Roma. So there are teams who've been keeping track of his developments. Origi seems to be, Wolves always seem to be linked with him. Do you think they're long-time admirers of him? They could probably use a striker, to be fair. Raul Jimenez is just coming back from that horrendous skull fracture, and João Silva didn't really cut it in his absence, so they could possibly do with another striker. But yeah, I think it's a case of just keeping an eye on those 2, and then Liverpool could spring into action with whoever's on the shortlist, which Jarrod Bowen does seem to be one of them.
Yeah, it sort of seems to be one of those, Dan, where this kind of been the blockage of waiting for squad players to move out, more so in terms of numbers really than specifically needing to raise the funds needed to bring players in. But it is an interesting sort of way in which this might play out in terms of midfielder or forward, which one's the priority Liverpool need to get done. And surely I would probably argue the midfield is the important one. And it might get to a stage of the money just needs to be put down on a target to bring someone in rather than waiting, because we saw kind of the patient approach and the waiting game, certainly with defenders last year, didn't really pay off for Liverpool.
No, it didn't. And we are in, another unusual summer. I mean, it's often the case that, there's a certain domino effect in terms of transfers when one mood leads to another because someone needs to replace someone, and it kind of goes down the line because of that. I think that was more of a thing last year, and I think it's going to be more of a thing this year, just because of the nature of the impact that the pandemic has had on football clubs' finances. And you would like to think Liverpool aren't quite as dependent in terms of like ready cash flow as others. But the other thing, of course, to bear in mind as well is the quotas on homegrown players. I think it's 17 is it that you have to name, and with Liverpool having shifted on Marco Grujic and Tayo Iwanyo. I always struggle to say his name. Sorry, mate. That brings Liverpool down to I think that puts Liverpool bang on 17, doesn't it?
Yeah, but 17 foreign players. I think you're allowed. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think now with those two gone, Liverpool gone from 19 to 17. However, as Gorsty says, I think there are a couple in there who you kind of feel. The two prime examples, obviously, Origi and Shaqiri, where they've contributed massively to the club's success over the last couple of years, but maybe for their sakes and also for the sakes of the club, just to freshen the squad up, new faces, new voices around the training ground. So it may well be that things may well drag on a little longer than people would like. I think I'm right in saying, even though there was talk late last summer that they were going to have a situation where the window was open after the season started, but that hasn't happened, has it? So the window will still be open for a couple of weeks after Premier League matches begin in 3-4 weeks time. So it may well again be a case of having to be patient. But even though I might have been slightly critical of Liverpool's recruitment last summer in the last segment, they got the defensive situation wrong, arguably in the summer, arguably in January as well. But Thiago, and particularly Jota, the thing I loved about Jota it was kind of like an old school Liverpool deal. It literally wasn't being talked about by anyone, and then within an hour or two of the first suggestion, it was a done deal. It's harder and harder to do that, I think, in the modern game because of the voracious appetite for transfer news that from most of the supporters and obviously the media. But I think we just have to place our trust in the people at Anfield who, by and large, on and off the pitch, Liverpool have learned their lessons when they've got things wrong in recent years, and I think we have to have faith in them to do the same again.
Yeah, there was a saga and a swift negotiation last summer, wasn't there, Gorsty, in terms of Thiago and then Diogo Jota coming in. And one name that just isn't going away, I think we first sort of started talking about it on the Blood Red podcast a couple of weeks ago now, was Saul Niguez. Now, there is that gap in the midfield. His name is still sort of being banded around and linked to Liverpool. But if he's going to be a midfield player under consideration, very different kind of profile, I suppose, to Jorginho Wijnaldum. I'd argue every midfielder under the sun is, but maybe if a player like that were to be coming into Liverpool, we probably won't see such a hard and fast three-man midfield that is there by and large week in, week out, like we had with Henderson, Fabinho and Wijnaldum, and more a selection, a smorgasbord almost, as it were, for Jurgen Klopp to pick from, horses for courses to choose from match to match.
Yeah, I think we would have seen that more last season as well, but obviously the problems in defence meant that he couldn't quite move the parts around the midfield as often as he would have liked, and that's certainly the case of fullback as well. Robertson and Trent were pretty much made to play every game because couldn't really afford any more upheaval in the defence when you've got, you're basically just trying to get whoever's fit at the back, whether it be a Fabinho or Reece Williams or whoever. So next season, I do expect a little bit more rotation anyway. I think it'd be good to see Fabinho Thiago and Henderson playing as a first choice midfield three for a little while and kind of establish a bit of an understanding amongst the three of them. They only played once together last season in that Goodison Park Merseyside derby. So I think that will be the first choice three going forward. And then, as you say, horses for courses, whether Klopp feels you might need a navigator type or maybe drop Oxlade-Chamberlain back into midfield. I think he might be looking at himself as a bit more of a number 9 going forward, or at least another string to his bow in that respect. But yeah, it feels like we're going over all ground in terms of me saying that I think you absolutely do need a Gini Wijnaldum replacement. There's no way you can let a player like him go and just think that you're okay to carry on with what you've got. Obviously, Curtis Jones, he's still young in his career, but he's shown a lot last season. He'll be looking to take further steps forward next season. It was interesting to see Harvey Elliott playing central midfield in the game against Stuttgart in the half-an-hour exhibition against Stuttgart on Tuesday. But yeah, I think a midfielder is a priority, or should be at least.
Yeah, just stick with you, Austin. Just sort of talk about in terms of kind of names and things that have been touted around. Obviously, there was Yves Bissouma earlier on the summer that was kind of knocked back. We've heard now John McGinn's name interested, that word sort of put to him, and Jarrod Bowen. What Dan was saying earlier about Diogo Jota, though, it seems very unlike Liverpool that we keep hearing kind of these names and, oh yeah, Liverpool hold some form of interest in them. Whereas so often we sort of see them put out, whether it be a smokescreen or whatever, and all of a sudden a deal's been done in the background and all of a sudden announced.
Yeah, well, the two transfers you're talking about there, Guy, are specific to Fabinho and Jota in terms of no one knew either of them were happening, were they? And that owes to Liverpool's relationship with Gestafute, who are representatives of both players. We've obviously got enough of a relationship and a friendship there between them to kind of keep a lid on things where players who play for that agency are concerned. Whereas Thiago was one that was coming and going, wasn't it, throughout the entire summer, really, from June through to September when he finally signed. At times it was more advanced than others, of course, and then he finally signed in mid-September. So yeah, I think obviously Liverpool would prefer that the lid was kept on interesting players for as long as possible. But yeah, it's interesting as you see Liverpool linked with loads of players really, but it's almost a bit of a carousel. They are the same kind of 5 or 6 or 7 names that you see doing the rounds. But I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? A lot of the San Miguel stuff is coming from Spain, and there's been a few members of Renato Sanchez. I don't think that one will be happening. But I do think that Liverpool are, well, they have spoken to Neuhaus's representatives at some point over the last couple of months. I think we know that one by now. So it's clear that they are at least looking at who can come into that midfield role. They're not just putting their fingers in their ears and not planning to sign anyone, but it's just a case of what can be done, and I suppose we will find out at some point.
Yeah, we will certainly obviously find out and keep across the echo for the latest on sort of Liverpool's transfer hunts throughout the course of the summer. But Dan, this week as well, Jarrod Bowen of West Ham United's name popping up. I think a lot of people a bit underwhelmed with that as well. But in the past, sort of shopping within the Premier League, even look to Diogo Jota or even Sadio Mane, shopping within the Premier League during sort of the FSG reign has been quite sort of productive, aside from, of course, the initial spree, albeit Jordan Henderson came in that.
Yeah, well, and it was quite ironic. I thought that this Jarrod Bowen kind of link kind of emerged round about the same time as, I think it was the 4-year anniversary of Andy Robertson's arrival from Hull City for $8 million. This week, 4 years ago, 2017, I think it was. And there was a similar kind of sneering, dismissive, quite snobbish attitude, really. Why are we looking at players like that from a lot of these so-called football experts, who I'm sure a couple of years later will have been exulting about Andy Robertson, who's become an absolute cornerstone of Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool regime, one of the finest players, I think certainly one of the finest bargain buys that Liverpool have had. You can look back in any era, going back to the likes of Sammy Hippier for 2.6 million 20 odd years ago. Kevin Keegan, 35 million from Scunthorpe. You know, you're probably talking equivalent type of deals. They were maybe a bit more commonplace in Keegan's era, maybe even in Hippier's era. I think for a lot of football fans, particularly a lot of internet-based football fans, have become rather spoiled nowadays and just expect Mbappe's and Haaland's and the big glitzy names that they've seen on Sky Sports and FIFA and whatever. And if they don't get what they want, sometimes the dummies come out of the pram. So I always kind of take a kind of contrary type of pleasure when Liverpool are linked with this kind of player. And particularly, you know, and when you see someone like Robertson come in and prove these people wrong, I think it's extra satisfying. So, but I can't pretend to know an awful lot about Bowen. Obviously, West Ham had an outstanding season last year and proved pretty much everybody wrong, didn't they? And, you know, until the last couple of weeks of the season, we're looking a very good bet for fourth place. And Bowen, from the sounds of it, played you know, a key part in that. One of the interesting lines that I read in one of the reports, might have been one of Gorsty's actually, said that, you know, one of the appeals for Liverpool of this player is that A, he's reasonably versatile, but B, he's the kind of character that could come in and potentially wouldn't necessarily be too upset to play second fiddle, or, you know, already play a bit part role, you know, while this kind of evolution of the front three happens. And that makes sense because, you know, the danger of bringing someone like Haaland or Mbappe in, not that that's ever likely to happen, is that what you do with the current front three. You don't want to bring in a big name and then they're sitting off on the sideline, snarling and kicking off and pulling faces and, you know, giving awkward media interviews that just make the whole situation more difficult. So I can totally see the appeal of someone like Bowen for Liverpool. It might not please everybody, but you know, Liverpool have to operate in a certain manner. They had to before. You know, Liverpool have never been the way Liverpool run is not like Man City, is not like Chelsea, and it's proven to be tremendously successful in the last 3 or 4 years. What's happened in the last 18 months makes that need for financial prudence even more pressing. What we've seen in the last couple of years is when Liverpool absolutely have to go and spend big money, like on Van Dijk, like on Fabinho, like on a contract for like Alisson, like even like on a big contract for someone like Thiago that obviously didn't fit the general model of player that they would go by. They will break the rules when they need to, but generally they will stick to the model that they have in place, and I think we have to back them in that.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose the point you made there about a big forward coming, and we've already seen Sadio Mane rocking the boat, haven't we, this summer, and Naby Keita nearly falling off into the water. But Gorsty, in terms of that, I suppose with bringing in a midfield player, it's a lot easier sell. Wijnaldum's moved on and there's a space there you could theoretically say in the midfield, whereas bring a forward option in and having already seen not only what the front three have achieved, but Diogo Jota coming in and doing a brilliant job that he did, it's a lot harder to sell, isn't it?
It is, yeah, definitely. And I think that is why Liverpool will be targeting a certain type of profile this summer. Someone between 21 and 24, maybe someone who can play across the entire front three in a range of positions. Not unlike Diogo Jota, less than 12 months ago. Since he's played at Liverpool, he's obviously played on the left, played on the right at times, and even gone down the middle as well. So, you know, he was someone who was ready to take that next step in his career, and he's probably argued that he's done that since. You know, he was starting for Portugal, wasn't he, alongside Ronaldo at the Euros, and I think he scored 13 for Liverpool in the debut season, and Champions League hat-trick, and that would have been a lot more had he not been struck down for a third of the season with that injury as well. So I think Jota is kind of the poster boy for the profile that Liverpool will be looking to kind of replicate again this summer. Obviously, there are a few who are taking their interest in there. Donyell Malen at PSV seems to be one who they do like. He does have his admirers in the recruitment team, and Jarrod Bowen was the latest one to come out, and Liverpool are weighing up a bit of a short list. I think sometimes when stuff like this comes out, though, is fans immediately think that this is the player who Liverpool are going to be putting all their eggs into one basket and going to be going hell for leather to try and bring to the club. It's not necessarily how it works anymore. You look at last summer, Liverpool had a bit of a three-man short list for Jota's role, Ismail Assar and Jonathan David, and with Tsimikas they had four in the list: Jamal Lewis, Sergi Reguilon, Trying to think of the other guy's name. Lloyd Kelly. So they do draw up shortlists, and they kind of go for them all at once, if you like, and sign them all out and see which one is might be the most the easiest one. Not so much the easiest one, but which one can they get done. So we're probably looking at a similar situation. The only one who was probably different to that in the last couple of years was Thiago, and I think he was a bit of a special case. Such pedigree, a little bit of a contract situation at Bayern, a little bit older than the player normally Liverpool would be targeting. So that was a little bit of an opportunistic one for Liverpool, but generally, I think they will be working towards a profile of someone between 21, 24, possibly on the cusp of being an international, and someone who's ready to make the step up.
Yeah, interesting to see how it does play out. Right, time to move on to sort of pre-season and the friendly action we saw on Tuesday, and of course looking ahead to tomorrow's game with Mainz as well. Dan, in terms of those half-an-hour games, really bizarre, wasn't it? Because just as you felt as though you could start to see the game opening up a bit, the matches were ended, and then we had the other games as well. 2 1-1 draws. What did you make of them?
Yeah, they were kind of quite an unusual spectacle, really, weren't they? I remember reading an article on our site from Jurgen Klopp before the game on why kind of he was really pleased they were able to organise this, because from the sounds of it, it's something he's been quite keen to do in the early stages of pre-season, and he hasn't really found opponents kind of willing to do it. But I think it does make quite a lot of sense, because they've only been back in training, a handful of weeks. Obviously, in the early part of pre-season is generally, they're kind of whipping them into fitness and kind of, really hammering them on the fitness side. So 90-minute matches don't necessarily always make an awful lot of sense, even if obviously half the time they'll change almost the entire 11 at the 45-minute mark. But it gave a couple of those involved a chance to kind of get a bit of a run out, get some minutes in the legs. For the likes of Tsimikas, who obviously had a pretty underwhelming first season at Anfield, he seemed to perform quite well in that first game. Harvey Elliott, obviously, we've all got high hopes for him this season after his exceptional loan spell at Blackburn. He did really, really well there last season, and everything you see and hear, everything the little glimpses we've seen do look like he could be a really special player. And obviously, everyone was dying to see Konate. The one new boy that's come in. It's hard to judge too much on the short time that he's played, but obviously the short time he played. But there was that one incident where he showed real burst of pace, even though I think the lad was actually offside, to get back goal side and do what he needed to do to snuff out the danger. So it was encouraging. You'd expect to see it slightly stepped up a little bit tomorrow for the match against Mainz, which is a proper full 90-minute game, isn't it? Although you would expect to see at least 20 odd players used, possibly even more than that. And it's just all obviously it's our job to read as much as we can into whatever we're going to see pre-season. But I think we all know that you can't really read too much into it, because ultimately it is all just about fitness, pattern of play, getting the players used to each other again. Obviously, the full squad isn't even there yet. Some players yet to return from internationals, and whatever new signings may come in. But it was just lovely to watch a game of football when there was with Liverpool in it, which obviously is something we haven't seen for 2 months or so since the Premier League season ended.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, I suppose as Dan was alluding to there, we try to read as much into whatever we can and find cryptic little clues. But one continuation even from last pre-season is this idea of Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain playing in that false 9 position. Obviously, at the end of pre-season last year, he picked up that ankle injury and disrupted his season by and large. But that is obviously an experiment that Jurgen Klopp has a fair bit of confidence in.
Yeah, it was something he mentioned a good few months ago now. I think it's just kind of a little bit of detail on it in one of the press conferences, possibly back in March time, February, something along those lines. And I think one or two thought he might have been seeing it for the rest of that season. But obviously with Liverpool kind of, backs to the wall, going all out for the Champions League spot, was something that they weren't really prepared to do. But they're going to get a good look at it now in pre-season, aren't they? He started there against Stuttgart on Tuesday for the half hour. Wouldn't be surprised to see him there again at some point against Mainz and then Hertha, and then in those 2 games at Anfield against Athletic and Osasuna. So I think it could be the reinvention of him, couldn't it? You know, he was someone who was always forced that wide by Arsene Wenger at Arsenal. He never made any secret of his desire to be a central midfielder. I think his last game for Arsenal was the FA Cup final. Was he wing back? Was he, Guy, that day against Chelsea?
Yeah, he played wing back, but he did play the following season. He did start the following season, and he was given
his last game was at Anfield, I think.
Yeah, he was given the run around
at Anfield when Liverpool won 4-0.
Yeah. So Liverpool signed him later that summer in the season.
Yeah, deadline day, wasn't it? Yeah.
So maybe Klopp's looking at it and thinking that this player's got the attributes to be a little bit more for me going forward. He's got that explosive bit of pace about him. He's got a great shot on him, hasn't he? He's probably one of the few who you'd fancy from range in this Liverpool squad. Scored a good goal against Burnley towards the end of the season. That was obviously inside the box, twisted and turning and getting shot away on his left. So he's got a number of attributes that lend itself towards being a front man. It's just a case of, is he going to be the same type of player who will allow Salah and Mane to thrive? Because let's face it, these are the two main men for Liverpool, aren't they? So going forward, it'll be interesting to see how he can adapt to that role and see how he gets on. And then if it's a bit of a failed experiment, we do know that he can be a central midfielder.
Yeah, he's such a versatile player, and he has all the tools, doesn't he, technically, I think it is just a case of unlocking the ability that is within the player. But Dan, we also sort of saw a few of the younger lads, certainly in that first game against Wacker Innsbruck, one of which really caught my eye was young Kyd Gordon, who arrived mid-season from Derby County. I mean, Liverpool do have this real young crop of players beneath first-team level. Obviously, Harvey Elliott this year may be looking to replicate Curtis Jones from the season before. There's Mateusz Musialowski, who, of course, wasn't involved, and someone like Kyd Gordon as well, even younger, only 16 years of age. I mean, it is exciting times watching just below the surface what Liverpool have going on.
It is. There's a really talented crop there. They went, very close to it in the FA Youth Cup again last season, coming up just short. I think it was against Ipswich Town in the final. And it's there's a couple of Scouse lads in there as well. I think Leighton Clarkson is from our neck of the woods as well, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he's from Lancashire area, isn't he? There's Tyler Moore. Yeah, there's Tyler Morton who's... Tyler
Morton, I particularly remember putting a piece online about him yesterday, and he was saying about how his dad and his brother are massive Reds who still go to the game, and what an absolute thrill it was for him to kind of make his first senior bow. I remember when Gordon came in from the end of last season, I think Wayne Rooney, who obviously has been at Derby County for quite a while, spoke of him in quite glowing terms. Obviously, he knows what's... about the pressures young players can face, particularly when there's a bit of hype and a bit of noise surrounding them. The good thing about Liverpool is that the academy structure is so well established now. There's such a continuation in terms of method and approach and the values that are passed down right from the first team. And that's the whole idea about it, isn't it? The team should play the same way, so that if it's good enough, do rise up the ranks. It isn't a big culture shock when they come through. It may, the numbers tell you it's only ever a very small fraction of those who show the signs of promise at 16, 17, 18 that would actually go on to actually make it in the first team at Liverpool or even elsewhere. But it's one of these where you've just got to keep throwing enough of them, giving enough of them a chance, and hoping that one or two will be able to take the opportunities and potentially save the club a lot of money in the transfer market. Because as a supporter, that you always want that blend, don't you, between brilliant players, top stars, but also young lads that have come through. And obviously Liverpool have had one in the first team for 4 or 5 years now. Trent Alexander-Arnold, who potentially is, who has already shown, well, he's one of the biggest prizes in the game, and potentially can go on and write whatever kind of career he wants for himself. And that's the kind of that's what these young lads have got to be aiming for. He is the model for them to follow. But the encouraging thing from them point of view is that they know that there is a pathway for them if they show the dedication, if they give everything they've got, take the learning on board, and ultimately grasp the opportunity put in front of them. But one of the great things about pre-season is seeing who are the likely next cabs off the rank, and Gordon and Morton look to have as good a chance as any.
Yeah, it was a big kind of difference, I suppose, of course, in terms of strength of the two sides against Wacker Innsbruck and against Stuttgart, with the side that played Stuttgart more nominally the sort of first 11 players, as it were. Trent was in that first game, as was Joel Matip, and I suppose they're kind of guys who will be looking to maybe join that more senior group, and behind them in terms of their rehab are Van Dijk and Gomez. So are we beginning to get a very early hint that maybe it might be Konate and Matip for that opening game with Norwich?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was quite telling when Klopp got asked after the game, is there any chance for Gomez and Van Dijk against Mainz? And basically he skirted around it and said he'd be surprised, but reading between the lines, it was a no, wasn't it? So I think now Konate and Matip have got a few weeks to kind of gel together and show what they can do ahead of that game against Norwich. Matt Phillips, of course, it was an interesting one. Some people noted that he wasn't involved because of potential interest. Don't know that to be true, but it's a fairly logical step when you think he was involved in pre-season as much as anyone else. So why wouldn't he be getting a game? But yeah, I think it's an important couple of weeks for Van Dijk and Gomez. I don't think we should be overly concerned that they're not starting any friendlies at the moment. I think. Where are we now? We're still 3 weeks away from the start of the Premier League season. I don't think either will be starting the Premier League season, but I think they'll get enough kind of training sessions in the legs, and hopefully there's no adverse effects of that. And then maybe we'll be seeing them a little bit, a few weeks into the season when they're up and running a bit more. And I think at the moment it is with the shirts are with Konate and Matip, and if they were starting at Carrow Road on the 14th of August, don't think too many people would be too concerned with that, would they? Certainly when you think of some of the patched up backlines Liverpool fans were made to watch last season.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, of course, it is Mainz to come then on Friday. Make sure you stick across the Liverpool Echo website. We, of course, here on Blood Red will be with you with a post-game debrief, not too far after the full-time whistle in that game. Of course, Liverpool's second round of pre-season games, having had those two mini-matches with Wacker Innsbruck and with Stuttgart. In the meantime, do check out the link in the description to our Blood Red Club exclusive content, finding its way directly to your email inbox every single week. All it takes is for you to sign up, and that content will find you. But from myself, Guy Clark, Paul Gorst and Dan Kay, thanks for your time and your company. It's bye for now.